Welcome to today's Global Connections television program. I'm Bill Miller. The main purpose of this show is to promote a discussion of major international issues such as war and peace, economic and social development, climate change, and human rights that impact people worldwide. New knowledge will inspire, involve, and motivate all of us to better deal with these challenges and to help create a better world. Today's program will focus upon the World Humanitarian Summit, a very interesting organization that's a group that's going to meet in Istanbul very shortly. We'll be back in just a moment to talk about these and other important issues. Welcome back to our program. Today we're going to take a look at the World Humanitarian Summit that's going to take place in May in Istanbul. This is an extremely important conference, and my guest is going to bring us up to date on what will transpire at that time. My guest today is Mr. Antoine Gerard. Mr. Gerard is the chief of the World Humanitarian Summit Secretariat. Prior to his current post, Mr. Gerard served as the chief of the United Nations Central Emergency Response Fund at the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Mr. Antoine Gerard, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Thank you, Bill.
I appreciate you being with me today. You're involved in a very interesting and a very important summit that's going to take place May 23rd and 24th of this year in Istanbul, Turkey, the World Humanitarian Summit. Basically, what is going to happen? What is the purpose of this summit? Why should we have it?
Very important question. As everybody knows, we do see on our TV screen, more and more related, news related to the disasters and conflict, and we know that generates a lot of displacement and needs of population. So the intention of the summit is to address the needs of all these people. More than 60 million people displaced for whatever reason in the world. People were affected, by crises and conflict. So the intention is to do better in terms of the response that we can provide to these people affected by conflicts and natural disasters.
Now, on your website, you have three main goals, three main areas you're focusing upon. Just very briefly, what are they? And then, of course, as we go through the program, we'll be referring back to them.
Sure. And first, this initiative is the Secretary General of the United Nations initiative. So it is something that he would like to organize, and he had in his plan to organize this year. And what is very important is that we do address the needs of these people by being more creative and transformational. So the intention of the summit is to bring to everybody together, but not only the member states, the governments, the heads of government, heads of the states, but also other leaders who do contribute to the response of the humanitarian action, to be together for finding new approaches and ensuring that we are more efficient in the way we are actually responding. The summit would have also an opportunity to exchange innovative ideas and to be a kind of a marketplace where many of the different actors can be together and exchange and build on different lessons learned. And then the intention is that we will do better in the future. So the third aspect of the summit is to come up with very concrete action for the future.
And of course, our viewers, if they'd like more information on the summit, they can go to www.worldhumanitariansummit.org and get a lot more information about what we're going to be talking about today. You're talking about crises is what we're really talking about here as I perceive this. And of course, there are different types of crises. When you think of a crisis, are you looking at natural crises, man-made crises, civil wars? How do you define that particular area?
And humanitarian action, humanitarian response is actually to this different type of crisis, or it could be a hurricane, it could be a flood and affecting people, and they need to receive an assistance immediately. I mean, either by the national players, but also sometimes the international players to come on board to support the response. And of course, there is different other type of crises, related to conflict, national conflicts, international conflicts that generates the displacement and also creating additional needs. So what we're doing for that summit is to look at the best way we can address those needs, the best way we can respond to those different crises. And the intention of the summit is not only to look at the humanitarian response per se, but also maybe the root causes and how we could address that and how we can do better in terms of preventing those various crises, or doing better in terms of preparedness whenever we have natural disasters.
And preparing to prevent, the prevention is very, very critical because it costs so much less, there's so much less suffering if you can prevent a crisis or at least reduce it, minimize it to some degree, as opposed to dealing with it after the aftermath of a cyclone or a hurricane or an earthquake or a civil war or whatever the case might be. This is a really important summit. Now, this came out of the Agenda for Humanity, is that correct? Did I get that right? Or is
the Secretary General has released his report for the preparation of the summit this year on the 9th of February, and in his report is highlighting a set number of core responsibilities that he would like the summit to talk about and the various stakeholders participating to the summit to address. So those core responsibilities are exactly what you just mentioned, looking at how we can prevent, but there's also some of those core responsibilities related to how to do better when it goes to comply with the norms, with the various regulations and laws, international laws for human rights, for international humanitarian laws, etc. But other aspects of those core responsibilities is how we can ensure that we're not leaving anyone behind. We've seen, that whenever we have a crisis, when people are displaced internally within their own country or crossing a border or even crossing several borders, what is the core responsibility of the different players, of the different communities and the different collectivity, but also the member states to respond to those who have been displaced? How do we do better? We're very encouraged by the Syria conference in last February, when we have seen certain new ways of responding to the needs of those who are displaced and the refugees. There is also another core responsibility that looks at how we can do better together, how we can collectively respond together in a better way. But when I say collectively, it's also the different actors. Whenever you have a crisis, actually the national government, but also certain players, local communities, private sector within the country, international community, have to play, a coordinated way to make sure that we have a common outcome. And one of the other aspects of the summit is to look at how we can mobilize better, more efficiently, the resources to respond to the crisis. So very important 5 core responsibilities that we're looking at, and we are actually structuring the summit to respond to those core responsibilities that the Secretary General had drafted in his own report.
You mentioned the various groups of players who need to be involved in this, and one group is the private sector, obviously, is so critical. Do you find that there's more of an interest on the part of the private sector to get involved in these types of conferences, to look ahead? And I can think of some people who are very affected by any type of disaster, especially a man-made or an earthquake or a natural disaster, something like that would be perhaps the insurance companies or folks who perhaps would have to fund some type of damage replacement or whatever the case might be. But do you find that more and more of the private sector people really have a very strong interest in participating and to be an active player even after the conference is over?
They do, and actually this engagement had started even beyond, before we started to prepare for this summit. But the beauty of this summit is actually putting together the different stakeholders, not only the private sector, but also the different entities that do play a role in the response. For the private sector, it's obvious that we're not anymore in the first call, give money. Now it's actually much more sophisticated of the type of engagement. We will be very pleased to see that at Davos this year, we could see that the private sector is coming with new ideas, new innovative ideas on how to do better in terms of the response. They are also very much involved to support local communities, to support government, to have also some initiatives themselves. During the Ebola crisis, we've seen actually the private sector in Sierra Leone, in Liberia, extremely active. The national private sector to make sure that they are also contributing to the national efforts to address the Ebola problem. Same whenever you have a flood. I mean, sometimes the private sector is better organized quickly to provide the assistance to the communities, to their workers, to their families. So it's very important that all the different players are on board, and we're very pleased that at the World Humanitarian Summit we're going to have a major contribution of the private sector, not only the global private sector companies, but also representative of the small private sector companies that we know have been actually very involved in different places of the world to play a role in the humanitarian action. So the specificity of this summit is to be together and to see how we could build on the comparative advantage of the different stakeholders. Media plays as well a major role. I mean, what we're doing today, it's actually also to promote a certain number of concepts. But in time of emergencies, media could be a very important player to inform the population, to protect the population by guiding them, by giving them the right advice for life saving. So we do have as well the media contributing to our summit. Academia, by thinking, by analyzing, by doing more lesson learns about how we can improve the practice. So that's a summit not only with the traditional players, but it's also more broader in terms of participation, and we're very pleased to see that happening.
And media do play a critical role, and they can play even more of a critical role in the future, as you mentioned, to help people understand these disasters, prepare for them, but also to get the word out about what you're trying to do and how this type of activity can be beneficial literally to hundreds of millions of people around the world, and many, many people can benefit from this. Well, unfortunately, I won't be in Istanbul. Many of our viewers won't be in Istanbul, but let's talk a little bit about the summit. Maybe go through it as I noticed it was on your website, and talk about who some of the key players will be and what might happen. The first is obviously going to be an opening ceremony that'll take place in a plenary session. What is the purpose of that, and who will be some of the speakers, or what will be some of the topics dealt with?
Well, first, and sorry if I didn't mention that before, but it's an initiative of the Secretary General, but it's hosted by Turkey. And this is the reason why, by the Turkish government, and that's the reason why it is in Istanbul. And it is very important that this partnership is critical for the success of the summit. So therefore, the opening will be also, with the contribution of the heads of the government, heads of states of Turkey, to ensure that we have the right tone to start the process. The Secretary General, of course, would attend the summit because it is his initiative. It is something that he had decided to organize. And we would have also the participation of heads of states, heads of government, prime ministers, ministers of foreign affairs, various very important people, as we do say, from different sectors, and also the contributors of the leaders of the non-governmental organization, national, international. So the opening is going to be followed by a session where we would have announcement during this plenary session when those leaders can really say, as a leader of my government, as a leader of my organization, as a leader of my private sector company, this is what we are committed to do. But more specifically, and we can talk more about that, I mean, we would have very specific roundtables when we can have those topics as well developed.
Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately financed, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections Television are solely those of the moderator and his guest. Our viewers are invited to check out the website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous shows. If you're interested in distributing our shows through PBS, community access television, educational institutions, a website, or any other type of media outlet, please go to our website for more information. Global Connections Television is provided as a public service at no cost. Today we're taking a look at the World Humanitarian Summit and what will take place in Istanbul, Turkey on May 23rd through the 24th. My guest today is an expert on the summit. My guest today is Mr. Antoine Gerard. Mr. Gerard is the chief of the World Humanitarian Summit Secretariat. Mr. Gerard, we're talking about this upcoming summit, and we're going through some of the mechanics, I guess we could say, of the summit. Now, the next, what will come up next after the opening plenary and the ceremony? What do you plan to have? Do you have a roundtable type of discussion coming up, or what will take place if that is indeed the case?
And I was referring earlier to the core responsibilities that the Secretary General of the United Nations would like to make sure that all the participants of the summit are talking about and committing. So we're organizing 7 roundtables around those different core responsibilities to make sure that we can have commitments from the different players, not only from the heads of states, heads of government, or ministers, but also from the leaders of the non-governmental organization and others who are participating to the summit. So one roundtable will be around how we can do better in terms of conflict prevention. Another one will be around the humanitarian laws. Another one will be around how we can deliver better in terms of displacement of population. Another one about the gender empowerment, because we know that women can actually play a critical role at time of the humanitarian crisis. So we have 7 of those that we're going to organize during the 2 days. And at those roundtable, commitments are going to be made by the participants. Commitment to action, commitment to transformation. You know, the intention of the summit is to really give a direction to this community that is responding to the humanitarian action, to this very vast national, international community. So those commitments is going to be that particular direction that we would like to implement for the coming years, and saying, you know, this is what we need to do collectively to do better. Some leaders are really prepared for that particular commitment. Some will learn about that commitment, and some others may not say, this is not a commitment for me. But nevertheless, the outcome of the summit would be this, there's various commitments that we have received from the different leaders, that commitment for action for the future.
Will there be some type of a commitment platform where you can view the commitments in the future, a year from now or 2 years from now, and there'll be some type of follow-up to see how well we are doing? If I commit to do X, Y, Z, or whatever that's actually taking place. If it's not, here are some of the problems I've encountered, or whatever the case might be. But will there be some kind of a follow-up to this?
You're absolutely right. I mean, it's very important that, whatever commitments may be, expressed at the time of the summit, we need to follow. I mean, whether they are implemented, what would be the difference, what kind of action, would be followed. So we would have that platform, commitment platform, that's going to really activate it at the time of the summit, but would be also a living document or living platform after the summit to ensure that people could contribute after the summit still to adhere to those commitments for action, to say, well, I heard you, and this is definitely where my government, my organization will go, and we're adding up our, voice and our commitment. But also, we will get a process of monitoring how those commitments are implemented, because it's very important. It's not only a summit where people will do commitment and that's it. It's actually to design almost, a post-summit, strategy to look at those commitments. So somehow the summit is going to be an interesting point of departure. How those commitments are going to be implemented, we're going to monitor, we're going to go back to the various actors and say, you commit to do this, where is it? Why do you have a problem? How can we help you to make that happening? How can we channel some of those commitments to different processes to make them more stronger? So this is what we will do after the summit.
This is a major undertaking, and you have such a rich, wide variety of partners coming together, or people who are interested, groups that are interested in this summit, and who really want to try to develop some type of commitment to be involved in preparing for future disasters and helping to deal with them as they come around. How many people do you think will be involved roughly, and do you have a ballpark figure of how many groups? I mean, right now it's probably a moving equation, I would imagine, but it's not nailed down. But do you have a rough idea?
You mean at the summit itself?
At the summit.
Yeah, and certainly. I mean, of course, this is the Secretary General's initiative, so all the member states, all the governments are invited, so 193, member states, plus the observers, plus the regional organization. That's the intergovernmental, if you want, process, in a way that there are a lot of those member states who are going to participate, and their delegation might be quite big. But also, of course, as you said, we invited other stakeholders. And so roughly we're looking at 5,000 people, which is quite a number. They're going to be, also interested in contributing to those roundtable, to those 15 special sessions that we have. Some of the special sessions about how do you do better in terms of education in emergencies. You don't want the kids and the teenagers to be in a refugee camp, in a displaced camp, and not having access to education. Another aspect would be how we do better in terms of the response to the global health crisis. So a lot of different special sessions that are going to help us to promote those different initiatives. And then many are also organizing side events. And the beauty of the premises that has been given to us by the Turkish authorities is that right in the center of Istanbul, the International Conference Center and also another conference center next to it, where we can have the 7 roundtables, the plenary session, the 15 special session, but also plenty of very interesting side events that are actually presented by the participants to the conference. So very rich, and we're looking forward to that event, but also the minutes and the chair summary will provide the details about how these events had been successful.
And of course, our viewers can go to your website, www.worldhumanitariansummit.org, and get more information, or they can just Google it. That's another way of finding it, and the information it's there now, and there'll be even more after the end of May, so they'll be able to tap into it. Thus far, you've been involved in this from the day one. What has been the greatest challenge in trying to get this type of summit underway? It's a very unique summit, it's very interesting, it's very important, but what's been your biggest challenge in moving the summit forward?
Well, first, it's a process that started about 2.5 years ago, and I think we should pay tribute to Dr. Jamila Mahmoud, who had actually led this process of consultation before me, where the Secretariat has organized 8 regional consultations in a different part of the world to consult the different stakeholders. If we have to do differently, how should we do differently? And get all these different recommendations and ideas. And then thanks to the support we received from the Swiss government and other different governments, we were able to do the global consultation in October 2015 in Geneva, where we put together all these different recommendations and giving a kind of already a sense of direction, what kind of a recommendation we should have to do better practices, to do, to change the way we're doing our own business to respond to crises. So it's been a long process of consultation, very rich, because you can see, if you do a consultation in the region of Pacific Islands and Southeast Asia, different problematic than you can have in the Middle East, or different than you can have in Johannesburg or in Africa or in Côte d'Ivoire. So a very rich process, plus a certain number of thematic consultation, because it was also needed to do some thematic consultation. So I should say that 2.5 years of great work to give us the direction and how we should do better. So I could see that now we are in that process of putting together all of this for the summit. But as I said, the summit will be also a point of departure for the implementation of those different actions. So I see the work done for the last 2.5 years, certainly challenging because it's a huge enterprise, but very successful. And now the preparation of the summit and then the post-summit is going to be as rich and interesting as we've been doing for the consultation.
In our last 30 seconds, will people who are not at the summit have an opportunity to participate in the future and to be involved in the outcome, in the strategies, in the future deliberations, and involvement in helping to deal with these problems?
Actually, you were referring to this platform of commitment. We would open this platform of commitment to anyone in the world. If someone leading an organization, a community, a faith-based organization, a local government feels that actually, that commitment is exactly what I would like to do, this is what I would actually implement, they would be able to express that through our platform. So we don't want necessarily the summit only to be the summit of those who are going to come, but also this World Humanitarian Summit in a way that everyone, everywhere will be able to make that kind of a contribution. And the beauty of this consultation we had is that now there is a global agenda to move forward the humanitarian action. So we're quite pleased about that.
That's good that everybody will have an opportunity to participate, and I am convinced that when you get into the summit that climate change is probably going to be on not every discussion, but certainly in a large number of them. You'll be dealing with health issues, you'll be dealing with natural disasters, but of course climate change, it appears, is the #1 challenge that we're confronting today, and so much of the devastation and suffering taking place around the world today can be linked back to climate change. And of course, this is going to be something that we're going to be dealing with in the future, and I'm sure that your folks will. And in fact, hopefully we'll be able to get someone from the group to come back on the program in June or July, and we can talk about what came out of the summit and what will be done in the future. But Mr. Antoine Gerard, I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Thank you so much for welcoming me.
Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed today's program. Please join us again for the next episode of Global Connections Television. I'm Bill Miller. Thanks for watching.